Have you heard of the crisis actor conspiracy? The theory where trained actors are hired to portray as victims to elicit perceptions of validity and urgency, allegedly promoted by James Tracy in the case of the Boston Marathon bombing. Usually, skeptics use this theory to their advantage of denying publicized catastrophes. In this instance, I'll be breaking down the Boston Marathon bombing crisis actor allegations and applying analytical tools to disprove James Tracy's conspiracy. Daniel Pipes, a Middle Eastern historian, uses the dismissing contradictory evidence tool. We can apply this to an argument made against this photo of Jeff Bowman, a victim of the Boston Marathon bombing, being rushed through the street by two medical responders. Conspiracy theorists, like James Tracy, have said that this photo was staged, but there are many cases of contradictory evidence that disprove this. The father of the injured man, Jeff Bowman Sr., has went onto Facebook to explain how they had to amputate both his legs at the Boston Medical Center due to bone and vascular damage from the bombing. Many reporters and documentaries that follow the life of Jeff afterwards can prove the physical and psychological trauma that was endured. Another claim by blogger B-Man, who wrote The Redneck's Guide to Reversing Their Control of Your Brain, was that several of the crisis actors even dumped liters of fake blood on the ground. But it would be nearly impossible for someone to come into possession of fake blood and pour it on the streets without being caught or documented by all the cameras, witnesses, and press media at the scene. This is an example of the Daniel Pipes analytical tool, common sense. With how much blood was present, there would have had to been several people with several liters staining the streets without getting caught. We're also able to analyze this conspiracy theory through the lens of political science, when James Tracy insisted on the Boston Marathon bombing being a false flag. He believed that it was the US government's military that hired crisis actors to legitimize the scenario so that they could carry out either a crisis drill or political operation. What Tracy fails to do, however, is further explain why false flag procedures would take place in Boston on that day and at that time. There seems to be no sound reasoning behind a politically motivated bombing that evidently did not aid or benefit the US. Lastly, we can apply literary theory to a discussion between James Tracy and a journalist, where there are implied motives similar to the plot lines of The Quest, where an ordinary person must take on the hero role by fighting or rescuing. In this scenario, it can be inferred that Tracy feels the obligation of taking it upon himself to save the public from the government's schemes and operations. This can be assumed through points in the conversation where Tracy boasts about his influential books, instructing the new media how to fight government attempts to interject propaganda into their growing online efforts. He was also reportedly slyly arrogant and had planned to move on to more prestigious surroundings, which paints the pedestal that Tracy feels damned onto and to help the less enlightened. James Tracy, who started off as a tenured university professor, has since been fired and encouraged to go down a rabbit hole of shedding light onto the government's darkest secrets and operations. He is the author of Psychopharma's Priesthood of the Mind, that has been featured on other alternative news and conspiracy theorems, such as the New Dawn magazine and Macedonian Truth Organization, but never a reputable news source outlet. In the bibliography of his paper, a combination of credible and undependable references are used mainly to support his narratives of American medicinal scams. This conspiracy theory has mainly been used for tabloid clickbait headlines, but has also dangerously fueled skeptics alike in denying global tragedies. Such claims have not only offended victims of the Boston Marathon bombing, but have been applied to other disasters throughout the years. The concept of crisis actors is so vague and versatile that any reporting, interview, or journalism that calls upon sources from the tragedies can be spun into a false reference, which is the essence of credibility in those scenarios. The popularity of this theory has even inspired an episode in the documentary The Kirk Show and multiple books such as Crisis by Matt Lee and Crisis Actor by E.A. Blair III. Popular vendor retailer sites like Redbubble, Commando Store, and Etsy offer various apparel merchandise that say crisis actor across them. This recklessly diminishes the severity of crisis actor movement and belittles the survivors and witnesses that reporters call on. Crisis actors can even be used to the advantage of political stances in the event of mass shootings and pandemics, where deniability is the quickest or easiest way for supporters of personal firearms rights to discredit the situation.